Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I am an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we're going to talk about the next full moon in Taurus on November 5, a moon with very strong Venusian traits, which represents the natural evolution, I would say, of the last new moon in Libra. Now this moon walks us through the influences of Scorpio that are particularly suited to introspection and inner work, and in this regard you can watch my previous video about Mercury retrograde between Sagittarius and Scorpio. So this is the chart of the full moon in Taurus. Let's start as always with the latest changes in the sky. On October 22nd, Neptune entered back to Pisces and will stay in its sign until January 26, 2026, when it will return to Aries. On October 23rd, the following day, the Sun enters Scorpio, whereas on October 29, Mercury enters Sagittarius, which is the zodiac sign of its exile. On November 4, the day before this full moon, Mars joins Mercury in Sagittarius, and this is because Mercury begins to slow down, turning retrograde at 6 degrees Sagittarius, so we have in the chart this conjunction. Now, as we saw in the video dedicated to Mercury retrograde, between late October and early November, we're going to have a long conjunction between these two planets that you can see here. Now, this is the chart of a full moon, and this means that basically we reach the peak of the manifestation process of the etheric forces of the Earth, and in particular that process which started with the last new moon in Libra on October 21. And this will be particularly evident, I would say, from the chart configuration that really resembles the last chart that we've seen. In general, a full moon is a good moment of retrospect and reviewing the past because of the light of the moon that is shed in the darkness of the night, and this hopefully will allow us to understand better what's going on. It is also a time for awareness and revelations, but also release and purification as the new gestation of the new impulses begins, and this will definitely happen with the next new moon in Scorpio on November 20th. So moving on to the chart, the full moon is located at 13 degrees Taurus and 22 minutes, meaning that it is a moon in exaltation. So here's the moon, and as you can see, it is shining in the starry image of Aries. Now, the luminaries, the sun and moon, are rather isolated in the chart. As you can see, they're not making any aspects. So we need to look at Venus, which is the ruler of the full moon in Taurus, in order to understand all the connections that the moon is making with the other planets. And as you can see, Venus is still in her domicile in Libra, and interestingly enough is located at 28 degrees of the sign. And this is very interesting because Venus is on the same degree of the last new moon in Libra that was happening at 28 degrees of the sign. Now this means that basically Venus recreates the very same configurations we discussed in the last new moon video. In fact, Venus is making two squares aspects, one with Jupiter, here it is, and the other one with Pluto. And in this case too, it is Jupiter connecting this moon, so through the ruler of the moon, which is Venus, to this configuration that is a grand trine. So these triangles that you can see here. But this time we're not talking about a grand trine of water because some of the aspects are out of sign. In fact, although Neptune has returned to Pisces, this is Neptune together with Saturn back to Pisces, Mercury and Mars in this case are now in Sagittarius, which is a fire sign. So these changes speak of a transformation. It's like a tale that the sky is telling us, right? So this conjunction was happening in Scorpio, and now it is transformed in something else because of these two planets that are now transforming this dynamic towards the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. Finally, we want also to highlight two other aspects of Mars. One is this opposition that you can see here with Uranus in Gemini. Uranus, by the way, is still in conjunction with the Pleiades, so it is a very unstable configuration. And on top of that, we have a wide out of sign conjunction of Mars with Lilith that you can see here, Lilith being the lunar apogee. Now, it's very interesting because the apogee is basically the point in the moon's orbit that is farthest away from the Earth, whereas the point that is closest to the Earth is the perigee, and the perigee is in the opposite point of the chart. And for this reason, the full moon is happening on the lunar perigee, meaning that basically the moon is very close to the Earth, and this is technically what it is called a super moon, right? Because it is going to appear larger than normal, so the lunar disk is bigger, basically. So let's tackle the meanings of the chart. As you know, I always start from the physical significations, and in this case, the full moon in Taurus is all about issues related to the earth element, to the territory and the land, as well as natural resources or resources that are related to food and agriculture. So on the one hand, we have Venus in Libra here, that is trying to bring harmony, balance, and justice. She is trying to reach that stability typical of Taurus, so this is a good impulse. However, on the other hand, the two squares that she is making highlight issues related to nationalism, represented by Jupiter in Cancer, and revolutionary movements represented by Pluto in Aquarius. In fact, as we can see, both these planets, they are assisting Mars in Sagittarius. Pluto is making a sextile to Mars, and Jupiter a trine aspect towards Mars. So what does Mars in conjunction with Mercury in Sagittarius represent at this point? It is a great impulse towards expansion that in Sagittarius could also represent a form of conquest of some kind, or even colonialism, and therefore the misappropriation of territories by force. In fact, Neptune, as we mentioned, have returned back to Pisces. And this suggests a certain amount of chaos regarding the physical matters related especially to the definition of clear boundaries. Now, Neptune is great for spirituality, but when it comes to physical meanings, it is a mess. Now, all this from a collective perspective can also describe the situation on the war front, of course, where this temporary truce has been accompanied by a series of occult maneuvers, intrigues linked to both the Palestinian and the Israeli factions. In fact, in themselves, they are not so united as we would think, and because of this truce, what we are seeing, what we are witnessing is a lot of division among them. I mean, inside of the Palestinian faction and the Israeli factions, they're not, they're not so united, right? Now, since this is a full moon, it means that all these intrigues that we talked about in the previous video as well, with the conjunction of Mars and Mercury in Scorpio and so on, they are here revealed by the light of the moon. In fact, the opposition of Uranus in Gemini, so again, we have Mars and Mercury making this opposition to Uranus, this could definitely involve media, the press, and so on, because we have Uranus in Gemini, and as we know, Gemini is the zodiac sign of media. So, how will it end? Well, since Mercury is preparing to turn retrograde and get back to Scorpio, in my opinion, this means that there are going to be second thoughts, people retracing of their own steps, probably due to having bitten off more than one can chew, so to speak. From a psychological perspective instead, this full moon in Taurus represents on a personal level, again, a search of stability, both financially and in relationships, in friendships as well. And this is because Venus is still in Libra, and Venus is the ruler of the moon. Libra, as we know, is all about relationships, but friendships as well, because it is a form of love. So last time we talked about possible group dynamics in this regard, which could involve our family and in general the groups to which we feel we belong, especially from an idealistic perspective, and they are represented by Jupiter in Cancer, especially family significations here, and Pluto in Aquarius, which is more idealistic. But in general here, the occult dynamics that we've been talking about, again, they come to light due to two scenarios mainly: people crossing the line or arguments in general that we're going to have with them. Now, the arguments are brought about by Mercury, which is already in the shadow zone. This Mercury is very slow, it is in detriment, and it is going to turn retrograde very, very soon. So it makes sense. Now, people crossing the line, they are instead brought by Mars, which in Sagittarius has a tendency to expand, maybe too much. Now, the best part of this conjunction, however, this conjunction between Mercury and Mars, is to being able to stand up for ourselves, yes, but with wisdom, because wisdom is a Sagittarius signification. All this to bring a sense of balance and justice, hopefully in a Venusian way, so without necessarily causing harm, because Venus, she is the ruler of this moon and she is in a very good position. She is in her domicile, right? Now, this is important because we can always funnel these astral forces in the best way possible to get the most out of them. Lastly, from a spiritual perspective, the full moon shines in the stereo image of Aries. Here it is, which in astrosophy, this constellation is the constellation of the mystical Lamb, which through the zodiac sign of Taurus nowadays represents the forces of the mystical Lamb, which is of course the Christ, through the realm of nature represented by Taurus. So we have basically what in anthroposophy call the Christ in the Etheric, which is a central theme in anthroposophy. In fact, following the event of Golgotha, Christ united with the earth, so becoming, strictly speaking, the spirit of the earth. So we had the solar logos descending and becoming the logos of the earth. Now, this in the future will allow the earth to reunite back with the sun. And in this sense, Christ can today be encountered not, of course, in a physical sense, but through a new clairvoyant ability that we can all develop, and we can meet him in the kingdoms of nature, and in particular in that realm immediately adjacent to the physical realm, that is the etheric realm. So in the chart, we find a polarity between good and evil. We have a dichotomy, so to speak. On the one hand, we have the forces of Christ as the new spirit of the earth that we can perceive in the etheric world. And on the other, we have Lilith. And Lilith is instead, in a certain sense, the shadow of the earth. Anthroposophically speaking, we can say that she represents the mouth of the so-called eighth sphere. Now, the eighth sphere is a concept that we find in anthroposophy that is basically a sphere that is still part of the Earth, but it is a sphere that is being removed from human evolution through the impulse of the forces of hindrance, the evil forces. So basically what's happening is that the Ahrimanic and Luciferic forces are stealing astral and etheric substance from the Earth, and they are seeking to create a new Earth that will become in the future, according to Steiner, a black moon orbiting around the Earth. And that is precisely Lilith, also called the Black Moon. But for now, Lilith is a sphere that is still attached to the Earth, only in the future evolution of the solar system called future Jupiter. This is going to become an actual satellite orbiting around the Earth. Now, for this reason, nowadays it is essential, I would say, to cultivate the impulse of a spiritual ecology, not a materialistic ecology, but a spiritual ecology, a sense of care and love and nurture and protection for nature, because it is precisely in the realms of nature that we can today encounter the Christ in the etheric, and being detached from nature by pollution and so on means also being detached from him, basically. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.